into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God Damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God Damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God Damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Hello, and an extra Gothic greetings to the damned. Hello, motherfuckers, and welcome to Pod Damn America, the extra Gothic this week socialist podcast for the stupid children. An extra damn podcast too. I don't know, I'm trying to work that in there in some way. It's not working, but anyway, hello, welcome to this week's episode. This is just me doing some interviews this week. I have an author of a book I wanted to get in here for a while, Leila Taylor, who wrote a book called Darkly, where's Darkly, subtitled Black History and America's Gothic Soul. It's really fucking good. It's really interesting. It's about being a black goth. It's about American history. It's about Gothic history. It's about all sorts of things relative and pertinent to our show. Maybe not the first one, but but it's interesting. And I also have Cole James Cash, host of Ghetto News Network, left YouTube show, which is a whole world I'm learning. Me and him are going to talk about being a POC in the left world, as much as I can speak to that as me being a pasty Mexican. But I'm very excited. I've got a great episode lined up today. I've got 2 great interviews, and I'm going to play some music that some people sent in. I'll plug that here in a second, and I'll plug it as it's happening. But hey guys, if you make music especially, send me your shit, and I'll play it on the show. Especially if it's like darkwave or synth pop or goth or whatever the fuck you want to call it, because we have a little theme going here. Anyways, enjoy the rest of the show. Up first, I'll be interviewing Leila Taylor about her book, Darkly. Just one more thing before we start. You may have noticed that the sound is crazy and weird on parts of this podcast, specifically my interview with Leila Taylor. I don't know what happened. A bunch of crazy tech shit went wild. That's also why it's a little chopped up, because our call kept getting dropped, and the pitch went all over the place, so I had to go back and correct it. So it sounds super weird, but I'm going to chalk this up to haunted podcasts. I think there were ghosts. And honestly, it sounds pretty cool. So that's all that is. And without further ado, as we get into this, there's going to be some music from some listeners. We're going to go right into a track called AI from an artist called MEVIUS, who is a pal of mine. And after that, later on in the episode, we'll be hearing from I Love You, Alive Girl, which is another track sent in by a listener that I thought was really awesome. All of their information will be listed in the show notes, so check that shit out. All right, here we go.
So what is
extra Gothic this week. I'm actually doing goth stuff. I know we get away from that sometimes. Today I am interviewing an author named Leila Taylor, who wrote a book called Darkly. It was sent to me by their publisher, and it's great. You should check it out. It's a book about many things, about being a black goth, about what goth is, how it's related to black history in the U.S. and the experience of people of color and all sorts of other things. So, Leila Taylor, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
No problem. I enjoyed your book quite a bit. Can you just tell my audience a little bit about your background, why you wrote Darkly, just the whole, let's just start from there.
Sure. This is my first book. My background, I'm a graphic designer. I went to school for graphic design, and I had this itch to write, and specifically about what it was like being black in a subculture that was perceived white. I would go to shows or events or parties and things like that of things that I liked, and I would look around the room I'd be the only black person. Oh.
Wait, no, sorry. I thought something happened and it didn't. Never mind, we're good.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So I would kind of look around the room and see that I was the only black person there. And, I started thinking why that was. So I started off wanting to look at black folks in the goth scene, because that was the subculture that was closest to me. And, what I realized is there really isn't that much of a difference between, black goths and white goths, or, Chinese goths or African goths. We all like the same kind of music and pretty much dress the same and like the same stuff. But the difference is a black goth is a black person in America. And the issues and problems that black goths face, black people in all kinds of cultures and all kinds of communities face. And as I was kind of looking into this, I found this slogan, this T-shirt that said, "So goth, I was born black," which I thought was pretty funny. But then it kind of got me thinking, well, what does that mean? What is the equivalency between blackness and gothness, and so that's kind of how it started. And it kind of started with that shirt and with the song Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday, or sung by Billie Holiday, which I consider the, epitome of American goth music is Strange Fruit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of how it started on the path, and looking at the history of being black in America, and, the trauma of that, and the continual trauma of white supremacy and black segregation, how all of that stuff, all of that anger and fear and sadness and mourning and all of those feelings that are, under the surface, all that has to come out somewhere, and I think it comes out in music and art and literature, and that's what I call the American Gothic, or the American Gothic aesthetic is essentially black history.
Yeah, totally. One of the first things that attracted me to even reading this book, and then I think you touched on a lot in it, is this concept of goth culture being for white people, and dealing with that as someone who is not. I am a fairly white passing Latinx, whatever you want to call it. People within Latinx all argue with each other about what all these labels are. I don't know what the hell to describe myself as, to not piss off all of Twitter. But, my dad's Mexican. My mom's white. I grew up in Texas. And I, for those reasons, have kind of felt much of the pressure of to not do things that are for white people because, it's, they're going to call you, whatever names from that direction. And then I've also felt the other pressure to assimilate. And so it's always been something that like is just kind of constantly on my mind when it comes to cultural stuff, because I kind of ultimately, I think, made a similar decision as you talk about in this book, which is just to, you got to like what you like, you can't really fight that. And so you should examine where it comes from. For me, I'm from Texas, and it's not that uncommon, actually. It's really funny because there is a general sense among white people that Gothic shit is for white people, but like Latin kids love, like, Morrissey is a huge thing.
Yeah.
My take on it has always been, my pet theory is Catholicism has something to do with it. But I don't know what your background is, so that could be a counter argument. It's just that, like, for me, my old Catholic relatives really put like all this symbolism and stuff of religion in my head, and then when I became old enough to to invert it, like, it became very like. The symbols were still powerful, but now it's fun to use them, I guess, in a dark, subversive way, is kind of where a lot of like that sort of stuff started to appeal to me. And I find that also to be true of a lot of famous goths, like Marilyn Manson, for example, was super religious. So there's like a slingshot effect. But I definitely think it is more than that. I do think that, that you got at a lot of the more interesting parallels to our inner lives and society in this book. But to talk about those stereotypes, like how possibly we could have arrived at a place where white people own death,
Exactly.
Where do you think that comes from, and how can we take it back?
Yeah. Well, I think with goth specifically, and I do make this sort of differentiation between goth and gothic. Like, for me, goth is super specific. It's a music genre and the subculture that came out of that genre, and while gothic kind of encompasses a whole lot of things, and it's an aesthetic, it's a perspective of things. So, but for goth, I think it probably started getting this label of being about whiteness, at least in America, probably around the time it started getting commercialized and became part of the popular culture. Because like punk, there were black punk bands and there were black punks and everything, and all of that was there. Like, there were black goths there, as soon as goth appeared, there were black people who were into it. But I think when you started seeing things like Goth Talk on SNL and stuff, and like the South Park Goth Kids, which is a little bit later, but I think in terms of popular culture, it was all white, not only white, but a kind of white middle class suburban thing. And it became attached to this kind of self-indulgent kind of angst-ness, right? And I think the more you saw it on TV and in movies, and Hot Topic comes around, and if the only representations you see of it are white, and if your only understanding of goth is the aesthetics of it, and you don't really understand, the music behind it or the feelings behind it or anything else, it becomes this very whitewashed, kind of literally, culture, you know? And I think there's also, I think from my experience, I personally have never had like a white goth person say, you don't belong here because you're black. I have had other black people say, you're trying to be white by liking goth.
Yeah, that's the thing that I can never explain to people is that like racism is not as simple as it is portrayed in our, TV and movies. It's very rarely is someone old school racist at you in middle class America. It's
right.
It's usually these more insidious, complicated things where people tell you, I get a lot of white people just telling me like, you don't get to, I think they get jealous of me for having a thing that gets me out of certain things they feel guilty about that are kind of a burden. And so, no, you're white, and so, yeah, it's always much more demented and like Freudian with them.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and I think there's also this idea that, goth and the Gothic, it's romanticism, and there's a certain kind of drama about it. At least, and again, I'm talking about like my gothness, which is like very much from the 80s. But it's a kind of languishing, kind of gender queer kind of a culture. It's a bit nerdy, it's a bit retro, like it's very much from the past. It's very much sort of looking backwards. And at least at the time, and maybe kind of still is, it was never really that cool to be goth. And I think there was this idea that kind of thing, that kind of, like Burning Man or like steampunk or like Renaissance fairs or any of these hobbies or cultures that are, purely for fun, purely, again, a little bit, nerdy, a little bit brainy, a little bit esoteric. All of these things are kind of, for lack of a better word, people think of them as like crazy shit white people do. Like they're white people things,
Yeah.
And that black people don't have time for that. Like black people don't have time for the silliness, that goth is. I mean, if you're walking around in a black velvet top hat in 80-degree weather, that's an overly dramatic, kind of frivolous, way of being, and I think for forever, black people have been in this space of vigilance and coolness and having to have a certain kind of decorum, and holding themselves together just to survive, in this space that is trying to kill you on a regular basis. Being a part of this culture that is so dreamy and not vigilant and so romantic feels, very counter to what blackness is. So it feels kind of like it's a thing for white people. Like white people have time for that shit. I don't.
Yeah. A couple of things about that. I do like that you made the comparison to punk, because I think a similar line can be drawn there, in that punk started off as this thing in a specific neighborhood in New York, and it meant something very subversive, and it was, very ideological. And then, by the time, like, I don't know, I was growing up, it was like a product. It was a very like bubblegum pop sort of thing that you buy at the mall. And because of, and this is very on brand for our podcast, but also maybe this is just how my brain works, that is a byproduct of what capitalism did there, that then causes it to flow out into the white suburbs. And then it just becomes a numbers thing where, because that's for communities who, largely are white majority, then it becomes a status thing and a thing that is fine for safe, comfortable kids to do while they're hanging out at the mall. But if you are either in that community and a person of color, so there's two things. If you're in that community, if you're a suburban community and you're a person of color, you don't get to just go do that shit at the mall with them without it being a statement. And then also, if you're not in that situation, it's the it's maybe further away and maybe even seems weirder if you grew up in a different place or whatever. But I do like to skip ahead a little bit. And near the end of your book, you talk about this thing where there's like a sort of seriousness or coolness that is projected onto black people to the deranged extent that people do something called digital blackface, online, where they they use just literally a black person as a GIF to react to someone they disagree with about politics or whatever. And all of this is to imply this coolness or silly or seriousness that is in direct conflict with what you're describing as being a black goth, which is someone who is actually into a thing that is kind of silly. And, the point here being that, it's more offensive to rob you of like the part of your humanity, which is, you should, part of life is having these like nerdy interests and things,
Yeah, it's part of being a full human being. And so much of, and not only the Black experience, but Native experience and any indigenous people and, people of the immigrants, where you are sort of labeled as a one specific thing in one specific way. That's dehumanizing. As soon as you start putting labels on people saying X number, this group of people does X, Y, Z, this group of people dresses like this, it's stripping away your authenticity, it's stripping away your individuality. So being weird and kind of different in that way becomes an act of rebellion. And actually, speaking of digital blackface, the other thing that kind of inspired me in all of this is this video that was going around of this little GIF, whatever, of this group of like white, like probably suburban, I don't know, like they look kind of industrial, like not goth, but like industrial, and they're kind of this group of guys, and they're all lined up, and they're like dancing.
Oh, I know the video.
And yeah, right. And then someone took a image or video of this little black boy who looked like maybe 8 or something, in this like yellow shirt, and kind of superimposed him in front of that, and does this like what the fuck side eye between the dancers and him. And all these people kept sending me this to me, like, haha, isn't this funny? And I was like, eh. And then at some point I was like, this is just sad, right? Because it's implying that this 8-year-old or 7 or this little kid has this level of gravitas and judgment, right? that you would expect from, a 60-year-old or
Yeah.
something, or that somehow, and not only that, but like, what about the Black folks who like to dress like that and like that music and like to dance that way? You're automatically saying this is not something, it's not only not something that Black people do, but it's a weird, freaky thing, stupid thing that white people do, and Black people don't do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So the more, yeah.
So something I'm kind of stuck on, and not to get too steeped into the politics of our show or whatever, is just, but for me, like something I've observed in my life is that there's like, there's like Republican racism, which is just outright sort of, they'll tell you who they are, but then there's this liberal racism. There's this one that is almost like it's trying to be woke, but in doing so, you have a situation like this where you really look at the person and you go, you're actually being very reductive and using my entire identity as a puppet in a little simplistic play, which has all these byproducts about the way that I feel, and that's like kind of offensive, right? And, this is something that we all have to navigate. And so when, I hang out at shows and stuff, and I tour, I'm a touring comic and stuff. So I meet a lot of people, and there are a lot of times the singular Black person at a goth show or the singular Black punk or whatever. And, it's a story that I don't think people quite understand, and that I certainly don't understand as a non-Black person, but, kind of relate to, in that you don't get the comfort of just blending into the mob and just being... not having to think about who you are at all times in those situations. So you really have to make it a concerted effort to enjoy the things you like within a community of people that are just kind of can't get it. And it always reminds me of my friend Kevin Titt is a comedian who is Black, and he's from DC, and he wrote a really great piece for the Hard Times called, I think it was something along the lines of Black punk makes it all the way through show without someone asking him about Bad Brains, which is, this is probably a thing I'm sure he's dealt with a lot. But yeah, to move forward a little bit, we're going to talk about the way you wrote this book, because it's very lyrical. I really enjoyed a lot of the imagery and figurative language and metaphors where you draw parallels between, these Gothic tropes like the dilapidated haunted house, and then the decay of Detroit and things like that. All these interesting ways of just overlapping, American history and what this Gothic thing is. I think it's a really creative way to write. And I also think it plays into this thing you're talking about where Goth is sort of non-serious, and it is. What's fun about it a lot of the times, although it is a thing that uses seriousness as a mood, it is something that's largely kind of performative and campy, and is is something that you play out, and you're free to have your own interpretation of it, which is a little bit different than something like punk, which is a very singularly materialist, like everyone fucking do this thing. But I wanted to ask you about,
There's a lot of goths who would say everyone has to do this thing.
That's sure. Somebody literally just tweeted at me something like that. So I guess that's fair and true. But I think the spirit of it being your own make 'em up thing is something that spoke to me. So my question is goth and darkness a particularly potent wellspring of creativity for you?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting. I kind of found my way into the scene through. I've always been kind of a weird, dark little kid, and I was always fascinated by, death and ghosts and the supernatural, And, when I was really little, we lived near a graveyard. And I remember, like, me and my little friends going to the graveyard and seeing an open grave, like just the hole, and making like mud pies out of the hole from the open grave, and like playing, funeral and stuff. So I guess when I was like maybe 13 or something, I discovered Susie and the Banshees and Anne Rice at about the same time. And it really felt like, oh, this is me, and there's a music attached to this, and there's literature attached to this. So I kind of found through music and art and books all of the stuff that kind of fit me. Like it all matched my personality, and I was like, oh, there's these things that I love, and there's these things that are me. And it kind of just became the way, when I got to a point where like, oh, I can make my own art, and I can write my own stuff and make my own stories. It just sort of became an extension of my personality and sort of who I am. So being able to sort of put that in this, cultural or historical context of goth and the Gothic is nice and clarifying for folks, but it's always just kind of been, weird me.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I can't really place where it immediately just jumped out to me as something that just is so aesthetically attractive. It's just kind of in there somewhere. But it is an aesthetic thing, so it's fine, because that's all it's for, is just, making life more interesting, I guess. Something I found really interesting through the historical stuff in your book was that you go back into the Gothic, where goth even comes from, which is, if you want to get right to the core of it, comes from the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths sacking Rome. And I thought that was this is something that made me think I have to talk about this on our podcast, because thematically what I am doing here with the politics of this show being, kind of far left and being, a counterpoint to a lot of really pro-capitalist, Enlightenment worshipping sort of individualist thinkers is, the reason I like the metaphor is because the way you describe it is, there's Enlightenment era stuff happening in Rome, and then these spooky, mysterious pagan things from the woods come and destroy it. And right. I definitely like that image, because, we're fighting these guys on Twitter, these dumb Roman statues for Twitter avatars and things. And just as a flag, just as a funny aesthetic cartoon way of kind of making this statement, I like the idea that we're throwing the goth down and like right. Like the Visigoths or whatever. But it is interesting that that happened in history, and then also goth is a subculture way later on in America, and a subculture is something that generally historically in America does fight against the individualism and the Enlightenment thinkers and, freaking Republicans and shit like that. So I guess if it's possible, can you speak to the parallel between the subversive nature of embracing goth culture and, and being a person of color in America and, being subversive by nature just by existing, I guess?
I mean, Gothic, The Gothic has always been an outsider. It's always been a little trashy. It's always been a little over the top. Um, this Jane Austen book. Oh God, what's it called? I'm going to be a bad because I'm not a particular Jane Austen fan, but she wrote a book whose name I can't remember. But basically, the main character, Northanger Abbey, I knew it would come out. The main character is this young woman who is this total romantic who is obsessed with this Gothic novel. It might have been Castle of Otranto, which is like the first Gothic novel or one of those. And everyone thinks of her as being kind of silly and immature and her head's in the clouds and overly romantic for being, she was like the first goth is this character, right? And then, eventually she kind of grows up and, she meets a, fine, upstanding gentleman to get married or whatever. And she kind of loses all of her youthful whimsy and her love of Gothic novels to become, I don't know, like a regular ass woman or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think the idea, and you kind of spoke to it, like just existing as an individual authentically as a person of color in the world is a subversive act. Just saying, I do not only do I not care about your whiteness, I don't want to be that. All of those things we've struggled for 400 years to try to be considered human from the white supremacy, and we're kind of looking at that and saying, I don't care what you think. I don't care what your definition of a personhood is. I am me and I'm myself. I think one of the things that Goth and the Gothic really specifically do is deal with emotions and deal with the full spectrum of human emotions, which is why there is this kind of melancholic, performance of mourning and melancholy in Gothic, and why I think that's so important for Black folks who've experienced death so closely and so intimately, not only historically, but just on a day-to-day basis. And for, generations, and this is like going back to the digital blackface thing, there was this idea of controlling your emotions, of you're supposed to be happy, you're supposed to be tap dancing, you're either that, or you're like the angry Black man or the angry, white woman. So being able to fully emote is an act of humanity, which is an act of subversion for people who are continually trying to deny your humanity. So I think I think one of the Gothicness of Blackness is this history of having to face death all the time, right? And having to take all of that trauma that we've dealt with and not only dealing with it, but
yeah, I mean, I guess one thing that's kind of interesting to me about some of the stuff you talk about is that it does, Gothic shit does like sort of veer from the deathly serious, like, when you talk about Strange Fruit being, the most important way that this mechanism and this way of looking at things has commented on and interacted with human history. But then it veers all the way back to the other end where, you know, that Bauhaus song, Bela Lugosi's Dead, is something that they say is actually was kind of a joke, but it's just sort of kind of, you know, steeped in this serious tone.
They were way too earnest, and then everyone like got all into the earnestness of it.
Yeah, something I think it's funny about like goth music or just like dark wavy or synth pop stuff is that the music is either often really bright poppy sounding music with really dismal lyrics, or the other way around.
Goth is that you're right. It either veers to the very serious and the very real, to the melodramatic or the overly dramatic, you know?
Yeah, and then there's also like, you know, you talked about Screamin' Jay Hawkins, and he's a comedic type person on a lot of levels.
Yeah, very campy. There's a definite camp level to goth that people kind of forget about, which is actually why I would probably consider Strange Fruit Gothic and not goth.
Maybe that's the distinction.
Yeah, I consider Toni Morrison's her novel Beloved, a gothic novel, you know. I think goth is kind of pain performed, you know. It's kind of the interpretation of it. It's taking something that's supposed to be repulsive and making it attractive. It's taking something that's supposed to be sad and making it pleasurable, you know.
Yeah.
I like that songs, yeah.
Certainly. And I think that's precisely the reason that it speaks to me, because that's almost one-to-one the reason I'm a comedian. And what I think the function of comedy is to sort of invert these dark things and turn it somehow into some sort of like positive aesthetic thing, right? And to sort of round out, I want to talk about something that I get to talk about once every 6 months or so on the show, and we have these conversations, which is in that wheelhouse or in that area. I think comedy and horror are both these genres, these like singular genres that don't overlap with other things that often, specifically, but because they both seek to evoke a response from the audience, and they both are highly temporal and dependent on the social things going on in whatever society that is their audience at that time or in that space. So for that reason, it's kind of fascinating to me to like watch comedy from Japan or something, because it's indecipherable, or it's for someone else. It's a reflection of someone else. These things are reflections, and they interact with their audience in a much more direct, like almost physical way than something as deep as drama, which, maybe more universal or whatever. But horror is really fun because horror gives you this game you get to play after you watch a horror film, where you go, okay, what was that actually about? Because you can make these arguments, for example, that the all the UFO and alien movies from the Cold War era were commenting on the xenophobia and the paranoia of the time. The atomic age and nuclear annihilation stuff. Yeah, totally. You can go through history and do this a million times. It's very fun. You can talk about the rise of vampires during, like, what was that? Was that the Bush years? I want to say. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my question is, what do you think the immediate, like, the horrors of the immediate future are going to look like, or the horror films of the immediate future? Who do you think is, what the hell? You gotta be kidding me.
So,
I think I'm good. Now my recorder's acting weird.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening. This podcast is haunted.
I know, right?
No, I think it's all there. So what do you? This will be our last thing, and then I'll get out of here because I got to run too. But what do you think what do you think our new monster is? What do you think the horror films of the next few years are going to look like, given everything that's going on in the world right now?
I was thinking about this, and I think there's two things. I think there's something about whatever form this takes of our loss of control and power due to climate change in the environment. And I think it's too easy to be like, oh, it's all going to be like avalanche and tornado movies. I don't know what that is, but I think there's something about our lack of power in controlling the sort of ever moving, freight train that is climate change. But I also I was thinking a lot about that movie, The Thing.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what's happening now and how we have, we all thought Nazis were gone pretty much. We all thought that, everyone understood that they were the bad guys. It wasn't until Trump that I think people really understood how racist we still are as a country. And there's this rise of nationalism everywhere, all over the world. And I think there's something about this idea of not knowing, the enemy is right underneath you, right? All the time, working all the time, and you just don't know it, and something exposing it, which is kind of like The Thing. There is this monster that was trapped in the ice.
Right.
And people come along and they melt it and all hell breaks loose, I mean, that's if I was going to write a horror movie, it might be something about that. I mean, all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, but in the last 3 years, certainly all of the things that we thought were safe and true and we understood as being givens are kind of gone. All the shock people had about Trump, and everyone's like, I can't believe he said that, and I can't believe they're doing this. People have been doing that all along. It's just that we haven't seen it. We thought they were gone, or we thought they were shamed into submission or something.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's what that was my reading of Jordan Peele's Us, was this festering thing that you left under the floorboards is gonna come back and get you because you didn't think about it. Which is also very thematic in haunted house stories and stuff like that.
Yes,
precisely because of the floorboards. But I talked about this on the show maybe last year with my friend Jamie Peck, and I think that was my assessment was that's why all these sort of satanic horror movies are coming out, because everyone left religion, and then maybe the horror story there is no surprise, it's very, very real or something. But I also thought the climate change thing would be a good story. The reason I think it won't happen is I don't think enough of the audience understands that's really happening and that it is a big existential threat. But maybe when we get to a point where there really is a consensus in the room about that, then we'll have enough people who are able to watch a movie where, you know, like you said, I don't think it'll be like a tornado movie or a hurricane movie. It'll be something where it's a metaphor for that. So the earth literally fighting us, you know, that is very scary. The ground swallowing you up just because it doesn't like you anymore, you know, and you hurt it too much or something. I think that'd be pretty cool. Actually, yeah.
And half the people don't believe that it's happening.
Yeah. Oh my God. You know what? We should write this.
I
know. Cool. Well, Leila, thank you so much for your time. Can't recommend your book enough to my listeners. It's called Darkly Black History and America's Gothic Soul. It is on Repeater Books. Go check it out. I'll have a link and all the information and stuff. Do you need to plug anything? You got a Twitter handle? What are you doing?
On Twitter, I'm hello_Leila, Leila. And that's kind of it. You plugged my book beautifully, just perfectly.
Cool. All right. Well, I loved it, and I look forward to reading the next one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. There it is. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. I am now talking to Cole James Cash, host of the Ghetto News Network YouTube show, Crossing Worlds into YouTube. Hello, Cole. How you doing?
Man, I'm good, man. You know, I'm good. I appreciate you inviting me on here. You invited me like 2 months ago, and then I got banned.
I was wondering what happened because I saw you back on, and I was like, did we have some drama or some beef or something? Did you unfriend me?
Nah, a lot of people thought that too. And it's funny because when I do have actual drama or beef, like I handle personal problems very personally. So I you know, if I got an issue with somebody, it's not gonna be no back and forth out in the open. You know, that's not the way I operate.
Yeah.
So trust me, man. You would know if I had an issue. I would just tell you.
You send some guys to my house.
No. But no, what happened was Lupe Fiasco made some dumb commentary about like rich people, and I said, man, that nigga Lupe is a smart dumb nigga, and they said that was inciting racial harassment, and they killed my account.
Man, that shit's so funny. I was at a show this weekend, one of the shows I was doing was Street Fight, and there were like 3 of us in the audience that were all like, well, here's what happened when they came to my house, and here's when they banned me. Like, everyone just has these damn stories from Twitter where you're just not allowed to, like, be mean to, you know, celebrities.
It wasn't even mean, though. A smart dumb nigga is somebody who sounds intelligent, but sometimes says airheaded things. It's a thing within our community. It's not inciting racial hatred. It's bullshit.
I just said the same thing about Dave Chappelle and pissed off a bunch of Yang people.
Yeah, I saw that tweet. I'm like, you a smart dumb nigga sometimes.
Yeah. You know what people really hate is when you just call them opposites like that. Because a bunch of people got mad at me for calling Adam Driver ugly hot. but it's a thing. You can be ambiguous in the way you look.
Exactly.
These people can't handle it. Anyways, man, I wanted to have you on the show because I am doing an exclusively no whiteies show, except for 50% of me. But it's a thing I feel needs to be addressed in the beardy, hoodie, fucking podcasty Brooklyn world of the left, because it's very white, and I don't know, man. I mean, there's certain issues that come up with that. Obviously it's a thing that's like a little bit overblown and used cynically by our enemies, but there is stuff that comes up and is relevant. I think the first time I ever saw you, I noticed you talking about something that is, I mean, I almost feel like this is a little bit taboo to talk about, but it's come up a few times in my life, or since all this left stuff has started, and I do think it's kind of interesting. And I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think it's something that does need to be talked about, which is that like the big fucking mothership of all this is this podcast called Chapo Trap House, which is a bunch of white people using the word the name El Chapo. And I was kind of curious what you thought about it, because I remember talking to you a little bit online about it, and I have had people come up to me, like when I'm touring and stuff, especially like Latin folks in like Southern California and stuff, and kind of like say they aren't down with it. But I'm a comedian, so I'm kind of like, I think I could defend what they're doing, because I think it's it's just it's a funny joke where the point of it was that this person is like a bad person, or is a fucking intense reference or whatever. But I don't know, man. What do you think? I guess I wanted to ask you about your experience.
If you want to give me some time to answer, I can answer. But before I do, when I went on that rant about Chapo, which was not disrespectful at all,
I didn't think it was.
That was also when, because I debated Nico House, and it wasn't really a debate. It was just me roasting that nigga. And I he has this like little crew of females that are good looking and dumb as fuck, and I was calling them the bird bitch left. A bird bitch is like, man, I don't want to hear what that bird ass bitch got to say. Yeah. But they look good, and I don't care if it's sexist, man. It's the same reason why these niggas be loving Tulsi Gabbard, man, because they want to fuck. It's just there's no other logic behind it, I
think she's hot, but I don't support her.
Oh, hell no. So, but yeah, like, okay, so basically, it's like this, man. It's funny to me how, first of all, me being in my mid-30s now, late 30s, I'm about to be 37. When I think of Brooklyn, man, I'm thinking East New York. I'm thinking Flatbush, Bed-Stuy. I'm thinking a lot of what I remember to be New York to be when I was young. So it's funny to me that it's associated when they say Brooklyn podcasters, they're not talking about Biggie and Jigga and Master Killer from Wu-Tang and all this other stuff. They're talking about like in a lot of ways transplants. So my issue with Chapo was this, and it's I think that there's some funny dudes. I think that they got some great takes, I think, though, unfortunately, the worst of them spawns people like the Red Scare. Fuck them hoes. Fuck them bitches. And so it's basically like they are the biggest patrons on Patreon, right?
It's like them and Barstool Sports or something. There's like they're in like the top 3 or something.
Fuck them white boys too.
Fuck them for real.
Yeah, no, I like Chapo, man. Remember I was saying, like, I disagree with something Virgil said, but yeah, I think he's funny. But
that's a fair space for us all to be able to operate within, I mean, I disagree with a lot of people that I like most of the time. And
oh, yeah. The thing is here's the thing. Let's say I'm here in the Bay Area, California, and let's say let's say I was to take Chapo's name. I was to take Chapo's name and basically, make $130,000 a month off his name. Them niggas is gonna see me. They're gonna hit me up and ask me, why did I disrespect you like that by not paying taxes? Because I'm operating within a community where they can get to me. It's you understand the cartels operate on a think of them as like the corporate level of drug dealing. Like they don't really care about what gang you're from as much as it's like, hey, this is who we sell to. Cartels keep a low profile here in the States. So what would happen is a surrogate would come and see me, you know?
Yeah.
And the thing is that, like, you know, I know that they're being ironic and this and that. I know that they're, you know, it's just a funny name. But my nigga, none of y'all can bring your ideology to any niggas in the trap. I'm guarantee you, all of them would be probably scared to walk into one, especially if they cooking. If they,
I think so.
If they looked at, let's say, a kid got 2 bricks on consignments, he needs to break that down into ounces. They call themselves Chapo Trap House, but and nobody has no experience with no trapping. There are certain times where I hear this thing where they sort of decry identity politics. That's why I told you.
Yeah.
The worst of it is like Amy Therese and them. It's like, nigga, you niggas literally have one of the biggest bosses in drug dealing and dope dealing. It's associated with Mexican. You know, and you use the term trapping.
Yeah.
Which is associated with niggas.
Do you know what the origin of that name is, though?
I don't give a shit personally. You know?
I mean, the intention at least is this.
I don't want to.
Let me just explain this.
Go ahead.
So I think what I am to understand what happened was the first episode they ever made was like on someone else's podcast. I think it was on Street Fight, and then they came up with the idea to make or to release it as their own thing. And the joke, I think, was like, it was self-deprecating. Like they were like saying like, oh, we should jokingly name this like it's the most fucking fire mixtape of all time, and as if we are like much tougher people than we are. So I think the joke is supposed to be on them for being like, you know, extremely not cool. Yeah. But that being said, it's still all this what you're saying is still true.
Yeah, because the thing is that, like, look, I get all that, and I'm just playing the devil's advocate when I say that because I like them dudes. But it's not like when you decry, you know, when you use terminology that comes from identity and then decry the identity to which they come from, it's just another instance of white folks doing white folks shit.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point. And I mean, it is something that, like, I don't think it's perfect. I'm very defensive of irony as a comedian, but also, I mean, as someone who is mixed experience, growing up very white, passing Mexican and all that stuff, you do constantly just have to put up with people who come from a point of privilege like that, you know, just kind of recklessly using your identity for things that they'll never even understand in the ways that they're abusing it, you know? So I can appreciate that.
I mean, and that was just my point because, man, how many black folks have been on this show?
I mean, I couldn't put the numbers to you right now, but, you know.
And how many niggas that's dealt with Fed cases? El Chapo was fighting a federal case when they made that name, man. You know?
Yeah.
And so you got to understand something, like, them niggas don't look at it as, oh, they're being funny. Them niggas looking at it, they making $100K off our boss's name, and he fighting a case. Let me share something with you.
I'm surprised they haven't sent anyone over here.
I mean, it's just because, you know, it's you do that to people you can do it to, you know, and them niggas like to keep a low profile here. I told you the cartels, you know, that's why the border is so safe, because the cartels, you don't want to fuck up business, man. And this is where all the business is. So they deal with everybody, Crips, Bloods, Sureños, Norteños. It don't matter. If you got the money, you doing business. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. But
what I was going to tell you was, let me give you an example. I live in Northern California. You said you was Mexican?
Yeah.
All right. So let's say, like, I'm in Northern California, and there's a lot of, you know, red flagging Northerners up here. You know about that?
No.
Probably not. That's all right. It's a California thing. So, you know, basically, like, there's 2 different major Mexican gangs in California, Norteños and Sureños, you know? Okay. Sureños are the biggest ones. I mean, when people say SA, that's short for Southerner, you know, S. But I live in Northern California. They have a different section called Northerners. If you listen to my in-depth episode on MS-13, I teach y'all all about it. Anyway.
Oh, shit, that sounds cool.
Yeah. So basically, man, like, let's say there's a rapper, my homegirl, you know, there's a rapper named Tweety Bird in it. Let's say I'll use a male rapper too. A rapper who's affiliated with Northerners called Big Tone. Let's say Big Tone catches a case, right? He's locked up. So let's say me, you know, I'm a gang member, right? Or I'm openly flagging, or I'm claiming that, and I say, hey, free Big Tone. You know what happens? His parole gets fucked up because of that. And now I got to pay taxes because I used his name and potentially screwed up his parole hearing.
Yeah.
So you got to understand, man, that like, I know when you're so far removed from that, you don't think about that. It's whatever. It's funny. And I'm not saying that they should because, like I said, they far removed from that. But I am saying taxes is a thing, man.
Yeah. Well, no, that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because this is probably completely alien.
They make a lot of money using that name. And it's just like, okay, that's cool. But can you show some love to the motherfuckers you taking shit from?
Yeah.
That's why I had to do my own show, because I'm like, yo, these people are taking our shit. These people aren't cool. I'm not saying I'm cool. But fuck, man, I'm something different than what they do all day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything. Oh, man, hold on. Shit. And we're back.
Okay, yeah, so, yeah, like I said, man, like, that's why I did my own shit, because it's like, I hear people, like I said, they take from us, and there's just, let me tell you something, man. A lot of, like, right-wingers, when they talk about lame-ass virgins living in their mom's basement doing a podcast, there's some truth to that shit. There honestly is, man. And it's
I don't think anyone's
like,
arguing with that.
The thing is like, let me tell you something. One of my niggas told me. He was like, when I talked to him about that situation I told you about, and he was like, you see why they look at you niggas like a joke? He's like, it's not the ideas, but it's some of these fucking people, man. He was like, they put you through a test that you can never pass, and it's just, and I get that, because certain aspects of the left are so polarizing, and the reality is the majority of the people are not like that, but the few people that are like that, it becomes polarizing.
Yeah, we all have to answer for it.
Yeah, but yeah, it's that's why I made this tweet too. It's like, when you log off this Twitter shit, man, is some people that really are just sarcastic dickheads, man, like you, Jake, man, you're a funny dude, man. But
Thanks,
it's some
man.
people, man, that like, they doing that online and they playing a character. All right, that's cool.
Oh, I've seen Twitter people, like, I've met Twitter people in real life that I've followed for years, and then you see them in real life, and they're like the most uncomfortable, quiet, like, timid people, because you can tell it's like, well, that's why they're so mean online, is because they're, they have to put it all somewhere because they're afraid to do it in real life.
Yeah, I'm not with that shit. I'm not with the, people are going to say what they're going to say. But if it's one thing if some people just they quick-witted like that, But it's just like, if it's really about this leftism, I don't spend my time shitting on Warren supporters. I don't spend my time shitting on fucking Bloomberg supporters, man. Like, it's just, differences in ideology I ain't tripping off.
Yeah.
Right? As long as that ideology it doesn't equate to the genocide of my people. But what you have in these podcasts, dude, you don't even got podcasts that really reach people of color, because most of these people ain't speaking our language, man. And so it's like, that's why I got to do what I do. I told Michael Brooks this, man. I said, Michael, I told him this face to face. I said, Michael, I take what you do and what Sam do, and I bring it to my people, period.
Yeah.
Because we need that. We need it. And we need it in a way that's not like, even Ben Dixon told me, he was like, we need you. He's like, we need you because you came out the gate as a quote unquote real nigga. I'm not a street dude at all. It ain't that. But I'm not going to hide who I am. And so because of that, I have no academic institutions to answer for. So it's the contrast between me and a Chapel Trap House. Yeah, I fucks with them. I'd gladly go on their show.
Yeah, but I think we're probably coming from a similar place where it's not, we're not negating all what has already been built. It's just that it's, it's not wrong. It's just insufficient. But that's fine, because that just means that we need you to do what you're going to do. It just needs to expand from there, because they do serve a purpose in talking to people that particularly enjoy that type of shit. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I find a lot of it funny, and I get some of the sensibilities, but then, like anything, there's also large parts of it that I, very much disagree with or don't like the sensibility of, and that's just why, you know, that's also why I enjoy talking to somebody like yourself, because I'm not entirely, and this maybe I'm gonna get to, you know, fucking pontificating about it or whatever, but part of being mixed for me and having a mixed background is just yeah, I'm never gonna 100% like hanging out with, you know, anything that is one monolithic ideology like that. None of it, you know, entirely reminds me of my entire experience or whatever. But no, I mean, I think you're right. So, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about just Ghetto News Network and where it came from, why you're doing it, shit. All that shit.
Well, I started GNN because what I would do is I would call in. I was working at a group home, case managing, and I would call in and talk about some of my experience with that. But what happened was that Michael would make these references. And he'd be making 5% of references. He's talking straight super black stuff, okay? You'd be hard pressed to find people who even know what a 5%er is, let alone knowing the parts of the supreme alphabet. And so I was like, who the fuck is this? I thought he was black. And so I would call in and I would just, call in and just, say shit that Michael would get and Sam would be all dumbfounded, and it'd be hilarious. But I'd call and I would try to get people's attention and then say something very serious. So I had, a couple people had suggested on Twitter, you should do your own show. Now, lots of people who like Majority Report do their own shows. And, I fuck with my nigga Ronald Reagan, a.k.a. Stephen Robbins, because he's a charismatic dude and he's a fucking immigration lawyer, man. I love that guy, man. He's helped me out personally as far as some immigration stuff. But the thing is that, people have their own podcasts and this and that, but they were kind of redoing what Majority Report already does. And I ain't trying to hear that. So basically I'm like, man, I'm going to do my own shit that's going to be completely different because I see nobody who's doing it like me or who could do it like me.
Yeah.
I'm tired of this idea that, I'm tired of this idea that I got to be civil with people I don't like. I'm not gonna get on a debate stage with Ben Shapiro and shake his fucking hand. Fuck him.
Yeah.
He's a bitch ass nigga, man. I don't associate with people I don't want to associate with, and in people of color's community, we don't do that. With family, yeah, but we don't just hang out with people with, there's a different ideology. No, if we don't fuck with somebody, we don't fuck with them. And
I don't enjoy debating people. I don't think it gets anything done.
No, but I like Ben Burgess. He's really good at that shit because dude's really smart.
I like when Sam Cedar debates libertarians.
Oh yeah, he's funny.
Yeah.
Call Michael Tracy a fucking coward. But basically, man, my show, man, I like to work with smaller issues, meaning I like to take what's going on literally on some ghetto shit. Let's say, for instance, next week I'm going to have Socialist Dog Mom on. Molly Conger to talk about, her local dealings in Charlottesville. I had a member of my DSA from Oakland on,
cool.
To talk about, nigga, we took over the block out in Fruitvale. We took over the block. And this is also what I mean, too, is I'll see these leftists with these tweets guys, we have so much momentum right now. Let's leave the Warren supporters alone. I'm thinking, nigga, who is we? You don't do shit but tweet. You don't do shit but tweet.
Yeah.
And I know I sound self-righteous, but I really be out here. I ain't hard to fucking find, dog. And that's also why I keep my discourse to a minimum because, man, if I insult you, I mean that shit and I'll bring it to your grill. I don't spend a lot of time doing that. But I just noticed there's this contingency of that's why I said, niggas who reverse engineer the little dirtbag left personas, and it's just nah, man, I have too much to lose I have too much to lose, you feel me? And so it's for me, I laugh when I see these motherfuckers really thinking they making a difference on Twitter, and it's just no, you got to show your face. You got to show your face. You got to do face to face. And if you're not doing that, then you donate money. Well, you niggas is broke, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, But if you shitting on other people while you ain't doing shit, that's what you would call a broke nigga mentality.
Yeah, and
the
you're also
broke nigga mentality does that, and I'm not joking. I see a lot of that on the left, man. I really do.
I agree wholeheartedly. That's a huge problem, and it's something that, like, whom amongst us can't really look in the mirror every once in a while and go, when's the last time you actually organized or did anything? I like canvassing because I just show
Same
up
here.
and I'm a body. I don't think about it very much. I don't have to be smart for that. But yeah, I saw you tweeting those pictures of the neighborhoods you were canvassing in, and that's good. You should do that because it's a fucking challenge to everyone else to back their shit up.
Log the fuck off, man.
Yeah,
and it's not that I don't enjoy Twitter. It's not that I don't enjoy niggas joking and shit like that. But I really do feel like people think their little followings reach anybody. They don't.
That's where I feel kind of conflicted lecturing people about this because, like, I worked a very long time to become a comedian with a lot of fucking followers, and my job is comedian, basically. So, like, I mean, it does something when I do it, but it ain't gonna do anything when you have 15 followers and you do it, No,
it's different. Listen to me. It's different when you're a comedian, so you're trying to use your position to further your brand, But if your brand is socialism and you don't socialize, then that shit's fraudulent to me.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I'm talking about.
I think we should all, actually do the organizing, actually read our theory, all that shit. You don't get to go be a poser,
If nobody in your local DSA know your name, you full of shit, my nigga.
I do think what you're doing out there.
I get it. Some people are disabled and some people have anxiety. That's okay. You better be doing something. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I do think what you're doing out there is probably really specifically important in California because I don't know if you know this, and you probably do, but like specifically the Latin vote in California is probably what's going to push Bernie over the edge this time.
Yes.
And a lot of that is untapped voters who, aren't fucking Republicans or Democrats or whatever, who just weren't going to vote.
Exactly. And Fruitvale is a big Latino neighborhood, man. And I speak Spanish, so it's like, that's what I tell you when we talk about taking over the block, And I view it literally, like the dope game almost, man. Like, okay, Bernie's trying to be boss. There's no boss right now. It's nothing but a bunch of lieutenants and capos and little dudes like Mayor Pete trying to be boss. So this is what we're gonna do. And once we got everybody, back in Bernie, everybody else gonna stand down. That's the primary.
We need to have a DSA meeting where it's you doing the first episode of The Wire where he's playing chess and he's explaining all the pieces.
Because, man, like, when you grow up in that type of environment, you understand that the GOP operates in the exact same way, man. GOP is like, we need this area. We're hitting this area. This is the messaging we're going to use. Right down to, like, the messaging, let's say, for instance, the polling data that Paul Manafort gave the Russians and this and that. Like, the Russians targeted certain areas that the GOP wanted as far as talking points,
Sure.
And that was smart. I'm not going to sit here and be one of them Russia resistance persons, but I'm also not dumb enough to say it don't matter because it did.
There seems to be a healthy middle ground there that a lot of, like, almost nobody knows where to land. Because, I mean, as much as I, enjoy the people that are really, really looking into how much bullshit has come out of Russiagate, like there's a lot of journalists who I respect who that's their thing. That also seems to be a lot of their only thing. And like some of that shit actually happened. It's just not full on, Manchurian candidate shit, but not to get bogged down in that.
No. And that was also, remember I told you, like, Virgil Texas was like, he was like, imagine knowing what a left harness is. And I'm like, imagine not giving a fuck about being extorted. If you good with that, I got some niggas in New York not bullshitting who can holler at you. And it's not that I'm trying to jump down and throw to nothing like that, but nigga, if my niggas and my family got to go to jail for shit like this, then I want accountability just the same. And if you're not tripping off of extortion and knocking off a U.S. diplomat, hey, that's on you. I'm not saying it matters within the discourse of the Sanders campaign, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to do with that because, like, I understand their point of view, and I do understand that it's also part of just their whole like comedic bit is how,
Yeah.
and the point they're making, I do agree with to some extent, which is that like, the Russia stuff, although it is important, is not relevant in the way that the resistance libs try to push it. A really good example of this being explained is there's an activist named Melina Abdullah who went on Pod Save America and yelled at them about how basically she was saying poor people don't give a fuck.
No, they don't. Yeah. I'm the only one in the hood who cares, my nigga. I'm the only one.
That's funny.
Hold on, one of my partners who, he's out there slanging and doing his thing. He literally told me, because I said, I was like, I know you can't vote because you're a felon, but who your girl gonna vote for? He's like, nigga, I don't know. And I was like, what you think about Bernie Sanders? This is last week. He's like, nigga, who the fuck is Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I know. Imagine, and that's the thing. We all live in this fucking bubble where we think everyone knows about all this shit.
Yeah.
Why we can't just yell at each other on Twitter about it.
Yeah, it worsens if you're on there because even I find myself, getting caught up in that, Yeah. And now, hold on. There are some people that I do think are funny, like Beth Lynch.
I like Beth Lynch.
I like Beth Lynch because she doubles down. Yeah, I was wrong, but fuck him anyway. I'm like, yes. Beth is not somebody who's, she keeps that same energy in real life, man.
Yeah.
She talks super reckless, and I love it. And it's just like I said, people can tell when you're authentic, Jay. They know when you for real. And it's just one of those things, man, like everybody can't do discourse like that. She can, but like I stay away from it mostly because as much as I try to be cool, like, man, I'm always serious. The old beef don't expire with me. And the last thing I need to do is be getting in beef with people that I can't see, can't touch, because the first thought I have is, nigga, where you at? Which is a dumb mentality to have, And like I said, I'm not a street dude or nothing like that, but it's like you gonna come after my name, then I got to do something, which is dumb. And I never even lived that life, but it's just a pride thing. But yeah, that's, I got sidetracked, but that's why I do my show, because there's nobody bringing this perspective at all. Like literally no one. There's not one nigga who comes from, or one person of color who comes from a rough background that didn't try to shake it off and do a show.
Right.
And I'm not doing that. I'm not going to be a caricature, but I'm not doing that.
Nah, man, you seem like very much genuinely yourself. I wouldn't think anyone would think anything like that. But you're right. I mean, there is a serious lacking there. And like, people will criticize something like the fucking online left right now as being, all white or all men or whatever. And the thing is, they're right. But the way to fix that is someone's got to make this shit, and this is all DIY. We can do it ourselves. It's pretty accessible. So like, I'm glad you're doing what you're doing because, this is the answer to a bunch of people sitting around going, they're all fucking white. Well, they are, but it's, that's just who they are. And that's, they're not going to, it's not on one fucking podcast to get all this work done. This is what should be happening. We need people like you, we need people from different backgrounds. And and also I can appreciate that you're like, that you're like a really working class person and shit, and not just like,
oh yeah, I got 2 jobs, bro.
Yeah, I mean, because there are some people that are like, will check a box, but then they're basically just a bourgeois, New Yorker or whatever, and it doesn't really speak.
They living at home with their mama, and ain't nothing wrong with that. But if you in your mid-20s and you're not hustling, and you don't have a serious mental thing going on, because that can be the case. That's what I'm talking about, man.
Yeah.
It be some nerdy virgin ass niggas. Nothing wrong with being a virgin, but it be some nerdy virgin ass niggas who, they got a purity test for everything else. It's like, motherfucker, you ain't even lived no life, bruh.
Yeah.
You shut your ass up before you even speak my fucking name. And it's just like I said, man, like, I'm not saying we should let go of, if someone does something wrong. But Michael Brooks talks about all the time, people evolve, people can change, man. And if you put your life out there, if they put their life out there, it's like there's some skeletons that you don't want out. It's like that Kobe Bryant shit, man. It's like, nigga, okay, I think that something might have happened. I really do. But did he continue that behavior? No, he did not.
Right.
Did he shit on the accuser? No, he did not. He never made that mistake again. So why am I going to hold his feet to the fire? It's like me getting on you about the time you were 8 years old and your mama whooped your ass, and I still bring that shit up as a negative. Like, no, man.
I told you to stop bringing it up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'll give another example. This one, this fine ass black woman I was following. I think I'm still following her though, because I have no morals. She was literally like, "I'm glad Nipsey Hussle is dead. Fuck that bigot." I'm like, what? What? It's like, let's say, for instance, I'll be honest, man. 90% of the people, niggas I know, are not fucking with trans people in any way, shape, or form. Am I supposed to stop talking to them because of that? No, because it's just the ignorance, Yeah. And so that's why, like, even on my show, I went out of my way. I was like, there's a really funny black trans woman, and I had her become an affiliate to my show because I want her perspective, So it's like, okay, yeah, a lot of people in my community have a lot of negative feelings towards trans people. So why not bring one on that's really funny and that's also black, so that we can have a dialogue about it, Like that. Let's say, for instance, the Joe Rogan shit. It's like, man, I don't fuck with Joe Rogan at all, but a lot of people do fuck with him. And Joe Rogan has said some really dumb and ignorant shit.
Of course.
but like, nigga, we live in America. This country is founded on ignorance and dumb shit. So it's like,
though,
he's the quintessential American to me, man.
I feel like what you're talking about and the anti-woke stuff is not terribly far apart, because the bad part of woke shit is the purity testing stuff that, will...
Mostly white people do that shit, though.
Yeah, sure, fair.
The motherfuckers that they're trying to, like, take a bullet for a trans person, take a bullet for a black person. No, nigga.
No, just be cool. Just be vaguely cool, and it's fucking fine.
Because I'm not anti-woke. It's not that.
Yeah.
But I just think that it's like, let us handle that shit, man.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause you sound corny right now. Like, don't get it twisted. I am not anti-woke, man. If somebody's racist, you point that shit out. If a monument is racist, you point that shit out.
But what you're saying is, like, when we were talking about Kobe and shit, and the concept of growth is pointed out, but you can't do this thing that people do on the internet where you hang on to it forever and then they're not allowed to participate in any of this anymore, because if you have that, if that's the fucking thing, well then yeah, you can't be hanging out with any of your friends that don't understand, trans issues anymore, right?
You be sitting at your mama house, lonely as fuck, sitting in a group DM on Twitter, getting no pussy, like that's your life.
Yeah.
And I know that's sexist, I'm sorry, it's just a hood term, but it's just like I said, man, it's just I'm a man of action, obviously, so I want to see more action from folks, man. And you could be on Twitter, you could have fun on that shit, you could be a sarcastic dickhead even if you ain't one, but make sure you out here doing something, because whether I know this country is founded on racism, slavery, and bullshit, but we live here. I ain't had a choice but to be here. So it's like, man, I got too much to lose. 90% of these white leftists don't lose shit when Trump is in office. The other 10% have a spouse of color. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's just like, to me, I got everything to lose, man. So it's not that I'm not on some resistance shit, this and that, but I do understand the gravity of what's going on. And it's just like I said, man. Like for me, like people were literally writing out ways that Sanders could reject Rogan's endorsement, and it's just like, dude, Rogan was literally sitting there saying the N-word over and over. You think I fuck with him? No. The only time I ever watched his show was when he had fighters on, because he's really good at interviewing other fighters.
Yeah.
And when Cornel West went on, that was really good. When Dave Rubin went on, because Dave Rubin was a fucking idiot. It's just like, there are times, but it's just like, man, the dude's like an ignorant ass meathead, man. But a lot of other ignorant ass meatheads fuck with him, and I'd rather he endorse Bernie than endorse Trump. Period.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's I think where most of us are coming from, and then all this just gets muddled by the internet and shit. Yeah, no, I think libs are the ones who are cynically using the Joe Rogan issue to try to just stop Bernie in any way they possibly could. It's not going to work because his listeners already heard it. They don't give a fuck. They're not going to hear that the New York Times announced that he recanted the endorsement or whatever. It's not going to fucking happen.
Yeah, the thing is too, man, is that like it's so hilarious when people use like quote unquote woke shit. Like I remember Elizabeth Warren's what's that broad's name? The trans woman, Ashley something, I think. And she was saying something like, when's Bernie gonna do something for trans people or some shit?
I saw that.
Like, bitch, you've been living you have all the answers on your phone, literally with the Google search. And you couldn't do that? Literally anything you wanted to know is right there. And it's sourced. If you want to remain ignorant and believe in QAnon and flat earth, you could do that.
Yeah.
It's like you couldn't Google that. It's like, man, like these people swear up and down like nigga, this isn't the right, man. In the left, we're gonna vet your shit. That's why I said authenticity is important to me. Before I go, I just want to say I see why certain people just say fucking I'm pivoting right. Because it's so easy.
Right.
Because it's so easy. Imagine the right doesn't have any cool black folks. Imagine if I went right. Imagine if I'm like, you know what?
Well, they would be truly unstoppable after that, Cole.
Black unemployment is down. The economy is booming. Oh, yeah, I guess you wouldn't know because you were jobless broke, nigga. That's why you asking for a handout, right?
Yeah.
Right?
You don't want to be.
You know what I'm saying?
You don't want to be that fucking dude. That dude exists. I've met him, but you don't want to be that fucking dude.
They do, man. It's fucking annoying, And the thing is that like what amazed me about Trump is how easily people just repeated his lies. Because Obama didn't really have that luxury, man. We wasn't just finna take that nigga at his word for everything, And that's why I appreciate the Young Turks because even in 2009, they were on his neck. They were on his neck. And Cenk in particular would talk about it, man. Like, yo, you need to go harder. What are you doing, Like, let me tell you something. People hate on TYT, man, but they're the biggest. And to be honest, man, like I wouldn't be here if not for TYT, because they were the first in 2007. They were the first of their kind to me, man. So it's just like I really fucks with TYT. I don't watch it as much, but Anna's a really good person. She was really nice to her when I met her. I know she was tired, And like I said, man, like, don't hate on nobody because they watching TYT just because you a super woke, ultra left progressive.
Yeah.
Shut your ass up.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna play this to every single one of those motherfuckers. This is just all. This is for white people, etc.
You should holler at your boy Virgil. Tell him to invite me on. He could totally redeem himself. I just invite me on. So
I don't think I have that sort of power.
Let me make this known, okay?
All right.
If y'all support Black/Latino businesses, you need to hit my Patreon, which is www.patreon.com/GNN Channel 10. And my 3 tiers are $2, $5, and $8. And the reason why I keep it so low is because if the hood can't afford it, what's the point?
Sure, yeah.
If it's for working class people, $8 is if you're really doing it. And like, nigga, that's a Netflix subscription. Well, not anymore. They reject the price of it. But it's just like, let me tell y'all something. If y'all want to support Black-owned businesses, y'all need to jump on my Patreon, man. After the holidays, I lost like 40 patrons,
Yeah.
So I need y'all to show me some love with that.
Well, yeah,
I need some Newports and 40 ounces.
Yeah, get that plug in because I have 10,000 people listening to this right now, and hopefully give you a boost. And I do appreciate what you're saying about the tiers because I've had people ask me like, why don't you do $15, $20 tiers and all this shit? And like, yeah, no, I just want this to be like fair and also affordable to the right fucking people,
Exactly.
And that's why I did Fugazi shit, but that's white people shit, so don't worry about that.
It's all in who you're trying to attract. Let me tell you something, man. The people you it's really true. The people you surround yourself are, who you are. For instance, you would never think how much me and Jamie have in common until I talked to her, I realized it,
Yeah.
that Jamie, as much as shit as she gets, and even I gave her shit, I was like, who is this corny ass mayonnaise sounding broad on this show? She whack. But then I listened to her, and I'm like, yo, she really be about this action. And then when, like I said, I couldn't do anything for Jamin, and she's doing something for me by being an official correspondent of my show.
Well, you know what's interesting about that is that fucking like the people that are against us and they're in the media and are very cynical online and try to constantly make these like big, broad, monolithic smears about, all of this shit being for the wrong types of people or for only being for, white people or only being for men or whatever. It's all phobic. Those people like they're trying to do something really cynical, which is to convince us that we don't like each other. But every time I have a live show or something, or I meet people that listen to the podcast, it's like all sorts of fucking different people, and we all have way more in common with each other than they would have us believe, I think that's what it is.
It's true, but also, like I said, too, think of the people you're trying to attract with your show. Just the statement you made, you said, look at this I'm trying to be reasonable. You're going to attract reasonable people. Shitty, toxic people attract each other. Think about them Red Scare hoes and fucking Amy Therese. They keep a whole clique of toxic ass fucking bitches around them, because that's what they are. So that's what they're gonna be. And despite the gruff nature of how I talk, I really do care about helping people and for people to have things they need. I work at a homeless shelter. That's one of my jobs. So it's just like I really take this. I live this shit through and through. So It's just like, if you're trying to have a show, I put it out. I used to only do it maybe about a couple times a month, but now I'm moving to the studio, so I'm going to be doing it more. And like I said, man, like you are who you surround yourself with. So your listeners are a reflection of you. My listeners are certainly a reflection of me, because before I go, I will say this, do you like big asses? Do you like big titties? Do you like socialism? Do you like communism? Do you love them strippers? Do you love this rap shit? If you said no to any of these questions, then Ghetto News Network is not for you.
I love it, man.
Period.
We should print that shit like an old Soviet poster.
And I do want to say that, I know like I'm a man, I'm a straight man, so I like what I like. But if you are not straight or not a man, just sub in your favorite, body part for those other things. That's cool. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm good with that, And I just need to make that clear, because I don't want I don't want any of the ladies or any of my trans/LGBTQ folks to feel left out.
Sure. All right. All respect, man. I think we got to wrap up because I went a little long here, but I appreciate you, man. I appreciate the work you're doing. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, man. I mean, I think you said it all.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. I need that blue check clout, homie.
All right, well, I'll work on getting you a blue check. I'll bring it up the next meeting and
the next meeting
under my fucking mask. All right, later, man. All right, everyone. That was my episode with Leila Taylor, author of Darkly, and Cole James Cash, host of Ghetto News Network on YouTube. Hope you liked it. Also, do me a favor, and if you enjoy the show, rate, review, and subscribe and all that shit on YouTube. It helps our numbers. Been forgetting to pump that shit up lately, but it helps. Say whatever you want. Say whatever on the comments. I don't give a fuck. Also, if you live in New York, we will be doing a live edition of the podcast, maybe just a live show at Caroline's Comedy Club in Times Square on Super Tuesday. It's going to be a big ass show, so drag your asses out of Brooklyn and into Times Square. I know. Come hang out with us, and we'll all hang out, and we'll take pictures with the Elmo guy outside of the building afterwards and stuff. Can't fucking hype this shit enough. Please buy tickets in advance. This will help us a lot if we can make this show a banger. And we'll be doing more stuff there, I think, after that. And then also I will be on the road. I'm in Pittsburgh on Valentine's Day at Dee's Cafe. It's all on my pinned tweet, my website. And I think I'm going back on tour pretty soon this year. I think I'm going to Florida soon. Can't really announce yet until it's rolled out. But yeah, thanks for listening.